Hello and welcome to this webinar about chasing games. This is Play Development Part 1. A few things before we start. I just started the recording, which means that you will have this recording sent out to you right after the webinar, and you will have access to it for at least 2 weeks. I normally try to keep it longer than that, but I run out of storage now and then, so at least 2 weeks. The second thing I want to say is that you can ask questions whenever you like. You just type them in the chat box and I will answer them, most of them at least right away, and the other ones we will go through in the end of the webinar. Third thing, we will take a short break in the middle of the webinar, just a 5-minute break before we continue. So we are going to talk about play development, and this is part 1, which is mostly or all about, I would say, building motivation, intensity, engagement in general. And that's the reason why I want to show you the progression plan for the whole play development and look at where this fits into that progression plan. So, I mean, the whole idea with building motivation for the reward is of course that we'll use it for the training later on for detection, tracking, bite work, obedience, and whatever it is. So this is something that I consider training and something that doesn't come for free. Some dogs are, of course, more easy to start up than others, but it still is something that we need to spend time on, and that's what we call reward development. And the part that we will focus on tonight is the first module, and it's chasing games, and we will go, of course, more into details with that. But in general, it looks like this. We start with food games, which is a way to start up the chasing, but using low intensity rewards, low value rewards before we start using toys. And they are easier to the food rewards are easier to handle. It's easier for the trainer and also for the dog to learn the mechanics before we start using more high intense toys. When we're done the food games, and you will see videos of this, of course, the next step is to introduce the toys. We do that with both flirt poles and toys that you can hold in your hand, just a cog on a rope or a ball on a rope. And then we bring those chasing games closer and closer, because distance is an important factor when it comes to building drive in the beginning. Because if we are too close physically to the dog, they can be a little bit overwhelmed almost by adding this close contact, and it can create some insecurity and competition. And we will wait with that type of play until we have a dog who, first of all, has a lot of motivation for the toy itself. And that's why distance at this point is good, because then we can let the dog be a little bit away from us and build up the interest for the toy. And then, like I said, we bring it closer and closer, starting after a while to do chasing games around us. And then we are gradually going more and more into the social interaction in play, the social play, tugging, and things like that. The whole part there is about motivation, drive, speed, intensity, things like that. So we have to be careful with bringing too much rules into that part of the play. We can do that as soon as we have high motivation for playing and high motivation for the toy. And the first part that we start with then is to train the dog to come back with the toy and to release the toy and to do all of that, all of those rules and more communication and social interaction. And those parts is something that I talk about in Play Development Part 2. So I have a recording, I think, from that one, but we will talk a little bit about that tonight, but we will focus on the first part. And we will start with chasing games and explain the reason why chasing games are important for the drive building. I consider it being the foundation for all the rest of the play. it's the safest way to start up and stimulate the motivation for playing is to use movements and to use movements that trigger the dogs to catch the toy. So the material of the toy is of course important here, because it's important that the dog is comfortable biting in it. So that's an important aspect of play. But to be aware of your own movements and not be too much over the dog and doing this tugging too early. Because like I said, we want the dog's focus to be on the toy. So we have to do small movements and try to keep the rest of our body quite still, so we don't compete with interest, with the dog's interest. The goal with this part of the play development is not to teach the dog to play together with me. Remember that it's about building motivation for the toy itself. And that is the reason why stealing is an important principle, because we have to get the toy from the dog in some way. And if we start to train the out too early, then it is a risk that the dog start to think that, okay, this is all about releasing the toy, it's all about rules, it's all about restrictions. But if we can steal the toy in a playful way, then we can integrate it in the chasing games and get it even more motivated for the toy. And this actually helps you to train a reliable and really quick out later on. One thing is quite difficult with play, and that is to do progression plans, very specific, detailed progression plans, counting the number of repetitions and all that. Because in play, we have to set criteria for things that are difficult to measure. It's intensity, focus, acceleration, speed. We just have to learn how it feels when the dog really wants that toy. So we have to be prepared to change plan immediately this quick. If we have planned to start adding misses to let the dog miss the toy in the chasing games, we have to be prepared to look at the dog's acceleration and intensity to see that, well, maybe he needs to catch it quicker, because otherwise he will give up, and that can change from session to session. So this is the reason why I think play is a really useful way of learning how to read your dog and how to interact with your dog in a way that is actually, you can't compare it with anything else. You get really close to the dog's personality when you play with him. So it's I don't know really how to say this in a clear way. In modern dog training, which I definitely belong to also, and the use of positive reinforcement and reward signals has been like integrated in the way that we train in a good way. But I've also seen many examples of how that principle goes straight into reward development many times, which is always a risk that play and reward development, if it's too strict in that way, it's maybe not play anymore. So, I mean, obviously, corrections and positive punishment has nothing to do with play, but also other things connected to the rewards, like reward signals, can have a similar effect of control. So if we just by habit start to use our reward signals when we want the dog to take the toy, it is a risk that the play becomes too controlled and the dog starts to wait for the signal before he grabs the toy. And that can be very useful later on. But if we use that too early in the play development, it is always a risk that we we don't get the motivation that we want because the dog clearly actually gets too obedient. So I prefer to not use the reward signals during my play development, and if I need it later on, I use it specifically for some activities or some training. But I don't want the dog who always waits for me for my signal before he grabs the toy. I prefer a dog who's so motivated that he will always try to catch it during play development, so that I focus on that part. The other thing is that if we train, for example, detection and tracking, for those of you who have been listening to these webinars before, you know that we talk about the play, the search development. And search development phase 1, which is part of the foundations for detection dog, is that we hide the toy and the dog search for the toy and grabs it. And the grabbing part is really important, that the dog is allowed to grab the toy and immediately play, for example, when we hide it in the brick wall as a preparation for the detail search. But if we have a dog who's not used to grab the toy without getting a signal, then it will be really difficult to do that type of search development, because the dog will always wait for permission before he grabs the toy. So that's one example where you have to be careful with how you do the play development, depending on what you're going to do later on. Another thing is that these signals are very associated with impulse control, and we know that there are individual differences between dogs and their ability to control themselves. And especially with puppies, it can be very difficult to say anything about that puppy's ability to impulse control, because it develops many times a little later. And these reward signals can sometimes make them too controlled, like I said before. So especially during puppy development, it's important to wait a little bit and let's learn more about the puppy before we add even more control. That about the reward signals in play development. Be careful about it. I suggest that you wait until later when you start to use it. Instead, use the contrast between active and passive. If the toy moves, he's allowed to go and get it. Leash tension is another type of control, that obedience, and you will see many examples of that in the videos tonight, that I use the leash tension. And that is a way for me to control the dog in play development, but without using obedience. So it doesn't kill the drive, it actually builds more, a little bit frustration and drive. So that's the reason why I use it, because if I have to ask the dog to sit or wait, or sometimes, then like I said, it becomes more like an obedience session than a play session. So make sure you develop enough drive before you add the signal or the obedience. But there are parts of the chasing games that you can use to condition your reward signals, especially the release signal, when it's time to do that conditioning. And the one that I use for conditioning my release signal, the release signal means what you did now was right, go and get your reward, and the reward is moving. I want the dog to have a really intense response to that signal. So when I do the conditioning of my reward signal, I actually use chasing games for that, and I use the food games especially because there I can get a high number of repetitions, and I can I'm rewarding the dog during movement, and that gives me the perfect opportunity to condition my release signal. So just before the dog gets the toy, the piece of food from my hand, I say yes, and the food hand goes away, and the dog goes after it and grabs it. So it is a good exercise, but don't mix it too early. Using your voice, it's really a common thing. I see that dog trainers use their voice when they train and as soon as they interact with the dog. Remember that in chasing games, we want the toy to be in focus. So if we start to talk it is a risk that we compete with interest for the toy. So the dog will look at us and we create some social interaction and social expectations when we want the toy to move. So plan for how you use your voice. It can actually increase the speed and focus on the toy if we use different sounds and so on. But if we just talk to the dog, it is a much bigger risk that the dog will start to look at us or pay attention to us. Remember the previous learning history. How have you used these words before, and what will be the dog's association? So again, be careful with large, big movements or too much voice. Always in the chasing games, we want the toy to be in focus. You can use the voice in specific moments to get some extra effect, but don't talk just out of a habit. And that I think is very common in dog training in general. That, and I used to remind my the people that I have on courses to be careful with using the voice and in all training, and always have a plan for it, because it seems like it very often becomes just a background noise for the dog. It doesn't really care about it. So have a plan every time you use your voice, and then it can have a good effect. So playing with food is the first part of the play development, and by several reasons. Most of us use food for many things in training later on, so we want that food reward to be valuable. It is a good way to develop the mechanical skills for the handler, because it's a little bit more forgiving to use food than a toy. Everything will go much faster, and the dog will have the exercise more or less ends when the dog grabs the toy. So it's good to practice this on low speed. Also for the dog. So follow the movement on low intensity is a good way to prepare the dog's body for the movements that he will do later on higher speed. It develops body control and body awareness, and that is important. You see, many dogs, if they have like a lack of body awareness, as soon as you start to train obedience, for example, but also detection when they are high up on things, standing in strange positions, it's important with body awareness. And all of this is so much easier to do with food in the beginning, and it also prevents injuries, of course. But the food reward itself is good if we can train the dog to get the food rewards in different ways. You can give a piece of food, but you can also add movement to it and do chasing, which gives you several more options to rewards. It teaches the dog the principle of reward acceleration, that he needs to accelerate and to actually speed up to get the reward, which again will build more value to the reward. And also, like I mentioned before, the food games is actually a good way to condition the release signal, because the food is supposed to be given to the dog in movement, so we don't stop every time. And that's exactly the type of response that I want for my reward signal. And also it creates engagement through the whole reward process, because many dogs, when they get the piece of food, then they check out and then they are kind of just wait for the next command. But if they learn that the food doesn't come for free, they have to chase it, then you will get better engagement in general in the reward process. So the principles for chasing, both when it comes to food games and toy rewards, is similar, but we start with the food rewards. First of all, find a good way to hold the piece of food so that you can give it to the dog without getting bitten. You can have your whole hand full of many pieces of food, or you can give one at a time. That's something that you just have to feel what works best for you. If you keep the hand closed, it's not a problem if the dog push your hand. It's actually a good sign that he's really eager to get that piece of food. It's important to keep a high reward frequency in the beginning. So in the beginning, we go movement from just one side to the other. and reward the dog basically in every turn. So reward frequency, like in all new exercises, keep it high. That makes it less distracting for the dogs. Don't stop your hand or your legs when you feed the dog. Try to feed during movements. Avoid movements over the head. Because if I move my hand over the head when I turn, the dog will lose contact with the target. And it can be dangerous later on when you use toys. If you move it over their head, and the dog can flip around and get injuries. So be careful with movements over the head. Use pieces of food that doesn't need much chewing. I use the regular dog food that when I do these chasing games. Do both left and right turns to see if the dog has some kind of limitations. Keep the target in position. When you feed and you charge a new piece of food in your hand, keep the hand in the same position so you don't stop and start to put your hands up here. Try to have the target in front of the dog all the time. We can look at an example of food games here, and this is with a young Labrador puppy. So I aim for around 2 minutes. When I can keep the dog engaged for at least 2 minutes, then I can start up playing with the toy. And I don't stop using the food games. I do that when I start up the food games with the puppies or also with the older dogs. I do it when I give them their daily meals. So I do a session in the morning and in the evening, and I use like a third of the meal for that. And I use this reward ritual when I train also, of course. So just because I start with the play development with toys doesn't mean that I stop with food rewards, food games. I do that also. But I want the dog to be able to follow these movements and be engaged for a couple of minutes before I start using the toy. And I will show you a video where I do both chasing with food and with toy, and then you will see the similarities that the dog is actually using the same movements for both. So there are similarities, as you can see, and that's why it's good to prepare the dog on a lower intensity level before we introduce the toy. In the food games, I've actually seen some dogs who have problems to turn, for example, to the left, but no problem to right, and that can give you information about the dogs in a good way. So when we start with chasing games with the toy, it's important to, first of all, well, most of the videos that I show, you probably see that I use a Kong on a rope. It's not normally what I start with, and you will see a few other examples here. But the important thing is that it's comfortable for the dog to bite in. Use a soft material, but use a toy that you can hold with one hand, because as soon as you grab a toy with two hands, then we'll be in front of the dog, and that will be another type of play, more this social tugging. Like I said, we want to wait with that. When I have the toy in one hand, I can flip it out to my side, and I can avoid eye contact and all of that. So that's the reason why I want to hold it with one hand. And there are several options there. You just, first of all, have to use something that is comfortable for the dog to bite in. And especially since stealing will be an important thing. So it has to be something that is not, that the dog doesn't get stuck in with the teeth or something. We start with moving the toy on the ground, first of all. Slow enough for the dog to follow the movements. And the goal always is that the dog should be able to follow the movements all the time. If we just move it like this, then it will be difficult for the dog to follow the movement, and he will just be frustrated or passive, give up. Our movements, small playful twitching. When the dog grabs the toy, and I just do small twitching and let it go. Keep the prey alive, like we used to say. Just small movements that trigger the dog to bite harder. The thing is that it's very easy to be stronger than the dog, especially if you have a smaller dog. It's easy to be strong, so you just lift the dog and do two big movements. And what happened then is that the dog immediately realized that you will win this. And that's why he takes the toy when he gets it and go in the opposite direction. This small, playful twitching is extremely important to make the dog trust you and to be close to you. And we want to, like I said, steal the toy either by pulling it when we can see that the dog has a loose grip, or when he is on the ground lying with the toy and looks away and maybe drops the toy, and then we steal it. And immediately we start the play again. So we don't take it like this or put it on us. We continue to play again. So the dog learns that stealing is not something that ends the play. It just starts it again. The principles and mechanics for chasing with the toy. Distance, again, is really important. The closer we are able to keep the toy during movement, the better. The more it will trigger the prey drive. And also, the further away the toy is from the dog, then he will be able to see other things. So the closer we get, we will also get better focus. In the start, when we start the dog, we place the toy close, but also during movement. And that's the tricky part, to be able to keep it close to the dog during movement. In the beginning, the movement has to be clear, easy for the dog to follow. But after a while, we have to be unpredictable, because we want this toy to act like a prey. So we use unpredictable movements. And these patterns that we easily learn very often leads to bad targeting, because the dog starts to take shortcuts. So keep the prey alive. Like I mentioned before, that will build a stronger grip and more like determination. And it also builds the value of the toy itself, because many dogs, they are really interested in the toy when it's moving, but as soon as they catch it, they kind of let go. And we want to build a whole chain there. We want high motivation for chasing, but also high motivation for grabbing and keeping it. That makes so much so many reward situations more effectful. In chasing, we don't want the dog to catch the toy immediately. We want them to sometimes catch it quick, sometimes chase it a little longer. So we need to adjust the number of wins and misses. And that is what can be the difference between confidence and lack of confidence. So we have to look at the dog to see when is the perfect opportunity to let him grab the toy. And we want to reward the best attempts. So we don't want to wait until he gives up and then we just give him the toy. We want to have that criteria for speed. And again, the material is really important. Here is leather. and that can be good material because it gets even more slippery when they bite in it. You can steal it easier. So it's a good material, but if you have a dog who with a quite strong bite, then it will be quite difficult to steal it. So it can be a good toy to material to introduce chasing games. Adjust also the size of this toy because it can be too big if you have this size. So for smaller dogs and puppies, maybe just cut a piece of it. But that's a good material to start with. Stealing the toy is very much about timing and mechanical movements. And like I said several times, it's an important principle in the play development. So one reason for using the leash, and you will see several examples of that in the videos, is that it gives me control. First of all, I can avoid that the dog runs in the opposite direction with the toy, but also it gives me the possibility to let the dog relax with the toy. And it's really important that the dog win the toy and that he's able to keep it. So if I have the leash, I can let the dog keep the toy without holding the toy. So if you train without the leash, then it's very easy that you end up always holding the toy, because otherwise you will lose it. So leash is important to give the dog a chance to relax with the toy. Pull hard if you're going to try and steal it, because if you're not pulling hard enough, you will just strengthen the grip. If you have a dog with a really good grip and it is no longer possible to steal it from when he's holding it, then of course you can use your out command if you have one. But if you don't have an out command, don't try, because this will ruin your out command if you start to use it. So either you're stealing it or you can trade with something else, but don't destroy your out command. I would like to show you a little bit strange video maybe, but it's actually a really important thing. In this case, you have a toy on a rope, and if I'm going to pull that out of the dog's mouth when I can see that he's not holding a really good grip, then it's possible to steal it. But I have to be aware of how I hold the rope, because if I had tension on the rope all the time and then try to steal it, it would be impossible, because the dog will always already be prepared. So I have to use the full length of the rope to get enough power. And I tried to show this without the dog in this video. So that's what I mean with keeping the leash, the rope tense. It will be impossible to steal it. But if we have the full length and we just do a quick movement, then it's actually possible to steal the toy, even if the dog bites pretty hard. So yeah, targeting. First, when we are using a toy like that, we want the dog to bite in the Kong and not on the rope. And especially if we have started the play with soft material, well, then it's easy to go for the rope, but more often it depends on our movements, and especially that movement up over the head, which will target the dog to go for the rope. So targeting is important, that before we start to move the toy more unpredictable, the dog needs to know where to bite. So it will be, again, give much more a clear picture, and that leads to less frustration and stress. And it's easier also for the handler. If you hold the toy and you know that the dog will bite in the Kong, then you can hold it more confident. But if you never really know where he will bite, you will be a little bit careful, not get bitten in your hands. So if we present a toy like this, and then I move it upwards, what happened then is that the dog, the next time, will go for the rope because he expects the toy to move upwards. So one important principle during targeting is to keep the target still, so we don't move the target. Let the dog have a chance to grab where we want him to grab. If we have already problems with dogs biting on the rope, first of all, I hear many times instructors say that, yeah, it doesn't matter as long as he's biting. I don't agree on that. I think it's really important to start the play development with teaching the dog where to bite, because that will be more and more difficult to solve. And problems with the targeting will lead to other conflicts in the play. So I think it's better to deal with it immediately. This is another way of presenting the Kong here. So I give the dog, I keep my hand behind the Kong, so the dog goes for the Kong, and when he bites, I can give a little bit more rope. And in that way, I can gradually train the dog where to bite. So the first step of chasing games with using a toy, we'll come back to the Kong soon, but I will first start with an example of starting up chasing games with puppies. And here you can see another type of toy. I use a towel, and since they haven't done teething here at this age, I don't want to pull it, so I just do some twitching, and then instead I steal it when they let go of the toy, so I don't pull it out of their mouth. And that's why it's not that important, the type of material. A towel is not very good to pull because the teeth will get stuck, but I'm not going to pull it. So, but what you will see here is that I do slow movements on ground level. So I want the toy to be in focus. I don't talk too much with the dog. I don't use both my hands. And I try to have control of the puppy with my hand before I start, so that I can start the play when I think the dog is more focused. So movements on the ground, keep the toy in focus. And this small twitching, keep it alive, let the dog keep it. So that winning is a really important principle here. And many times we wait too long. Give them a quick win, and you will gradually see that if we let them tug too long before they win, many dogs, and especially these young dogs, they will give up. For older dogs, what happens if we do too much tugging? as soon as they get it, they will just go in the opposite direction. So if we do a little bit and then let them have it, it's a very easy way to convince the dog that this is play. So that's very important. And like I said, ground level. It makes it easier for them to be in like that prey mode instead of moving it too high up. And the other thing you saw here was that I left the toy on the ground. And I actually do the play development for the puppies on the exact same place every time in the beginning, to use those that contextual learning and that strong expectation on that place to give even more motivation for the toy. So I leave it there, so the dog the next time knows that, oh, it's there when we're going when we are approaching that place or that area. It's a very good way to do with the puppies, to use the contextual learning, because then they are focused and knows what to expect already when we are getting closer. So if I then jump ahead to playing a little bit more with another toy, and in this case Kong on a rope and biting on the rope. With the towel there, it wasn't a problem because the dog could bite anywhere. It's not right or wrong, but when we use a toy on a rope, and you have a dog who always bites on the rope, well, why even use a Kong? We want the Kong to be, or ball, it doesn't matter if it's Kong or ball. But what I want to show you here is the principle for how I do it when they bite on the rope. And there are two things to think of here. One of them is that don't respond to it. If they bite on the rope, don't continue to play with them. You will always only teach them to bite on the rope. And also, when you stop the play, make sure that there is no response in the toy. So that's the reason why I pull it toy towards me and I press it against my leg, and I keep my hand as close as possible to the dog's mouth, or to the Kong in this case, and then I just hold it and wait for the dog to readjust, to bite where I want him to bite, and then play starts immediately. Normally, you only have to do this a couple of times to solve the problem, to do the targeting. So that's why it's so important and so easy, actually, to do that targeting right away. So that's the principle. Immediately stop the play if the dog bites anywhere else than on the Kong, and wait for the dog to readjust. Keep the toy still, and the easiest way to keep it still is to press it against your leg. When I do the turns in the chasing games, I do them on the outside, and I do that because if I do it on the inside for some bigger dogs, it can be difficult to get room to do the turn. But also, it again it makes you avoid shortcuts. If you do the turns too quick, the dog will realize that pretty soon, and then he will just wait for the toy to come to him. So if I do the turns quite big, so the dog has the possibility to move together with the toy, and that's easier to do when you do the turns on the outside of the dog instead of between you and the dog. And make sure the dog can follow the whole movement. When I started to do that with the puppies, it looks like this. And you will see a few examples of turns on the outside. So in the beginning, you saw turns on the outside. And when I've done that a couple of times, I start to vary also the turns there, so they don't know where it is. But I always start on the outside. Another thing you could see there was the leash, that many of these puppies, they want to go in the opposite direction when they catch it, and that's fully natural for them. So it gives me still the opportunity, the chance to give them the toy and let them relax with it, but still have control of the dog. You could also see that I started to add some leash tension in the start, and that is a very important tool for later on for both indication training and search development training, where we want leash tension to mean focus forward. So that's how I introduced that. And it's important to add not more than necessary. So if I keep it too much tension, the dog will take it as correction. So just a little bit, so they learn to work through that resistance, so that I get more intensity. And that's how I start that. When I do targeting with this type of toy, I move the toy in a straight line away from the dog to begin with. And I have an example of that here with a puppy. And what I want to show you here is that I present the toy in front of the dog. When I place it in front of the dog, if the dog looks away, then I immediately lift the toy up and then place it back again, because I don't want to wait for the dog to look away on something and then look back, because then I actually reward the dog for losing focus. So focus in the start is really important. Place the toy close, and when I want to teach the dog where to bite, I just start with a straight line away. If I lift the toy up, like you saw before, then the dog will go for the rope. So here I just present the toy to the dog with a straight line. Yeah. So, and I do that also when I don't use the flirt pole, but just present the toy in the toy that I showed you in the video before with the puppies, the white toy. I did the same with that one in the beginning. Just a straight line, a number of times, just to do the targeting. After targeting, that's when we can start move the toy in all different directions. And to be able to do that, we need a dog who knows where to bite. But I also need a dog who has done the food games and everything, so that he can move in all the directions and turns in a smooth way. And a play like that can look like this. So there you saw several different types of dogs doing chasing games with different toys. And what you get from it is, of course, the engagement, the speed, and a high value type of reward that you can use in every type of training where you want a strong reward connected to to the toy rather than the handler. And after a while, when we have done a lot of chasing games, then we can add a more social component and mix with tugging, chasing, and that's when you have reached the goal, basically, where you can just play in many different ways, knowing that the dog will come back with the toy and release the toy and will be motivated to chase after it. But the chasing is very much connected to focus. And that focus comes from that distance, and the speed and acceleration also comes from the distance. So if we are able to keep the toy really close to the dog, and what I mean with close is like 10, 20 centimeters during the whole movement, and this is difficult, of course, but at least in the start, and then try to keep it as close as possible instead of just waving with the toy from one side to another. Always move the toy away from the dog so that the dog learns that he's the one who has to chase after it. It will not come for free. Variation in length and pattern. If I do the same distance every time with my movement, the dog will quickly learn to predict the distance. And what happened when they start to predict that distance is that they will slow down, because they know that the turn will come and the dog will go back to them. The toy will come back to them, so then they can wait. So it's very much about technique and mechanical movements. Now we are going to take that 5-minute break, and when we are back again, we will continue to look at chasing games. So see you in 5 minutes. Right. Back again. So, yeah, another way to get that speed and acceleration is to add a little bit tension. I showed you leash tension to use it with balance. Just keep a little bit tension and then let go of it. That will create some extra speed. But also sometimes I block the dog with my body, and especially with my leg, and a few times, so that the dog, when I feel that he's pushing even more, then I let him go. So that there are several ways of getting that extra drive, and very much is about using some kind of physical, like leash tension or blocking. And here I'm using the leash tension to get like a quicker start, and it can look like this: just a tension and then let go, and try to get some more drive every time. So that tension on the leash is difficult to see, but you can feel it when you hold the dog. So that you add some tension, you can feel that he's pulling more and more. So when I have no tension, the next repetition, you will have much higher speed. Same thing is what happens after the dog catches the toy. And I've been talking about this twitching. Many times it's like the handler starts immediately to do this movement sideways, playing tugging with the dog, and the dog is more or less hanging. And what happened then is that the dog starts to expect that. So you will have lower intensity, because the dog expects that the play ends with this hanging more or less in the toy. And then again, you are the stronger part, and that's why it's so much better effect from doing this small twitching instead. I try to record a video where I illustrate that hanging. So the dog is chasing, they catch the toy, and then I do this just to explain what I mean and what I don't think that you should do. And what happened then also is that you have used the prey mode for chasing, but then we switch to some social tugging, and using this twitching instead is a better way to keep the dog in that prey mode, and the prey is the important part of it. So the leash tension, the leash handling is a foundation for the chasing games. Tension in the start, we have discussed that a couple of times. To use it to gain control, to decide when, be able to decide when the play starts without using obedience, and also it gives that extra focus. But then when I do chasing, then I can let go of the leash. It's no problem. But I have to grab it when the dog takes the toy, then I grab it with my left hand, so that I again have control. But when you do chasing, you cannot hold the leash, because then you will just it will be difficult to move. But in the start and in the end, if the dog drops the toy, then immediately I pull the leash, because I want the toy to continue to be really, really valuable. And that adds that extra value to the toy if I immediately pull the dog and do it in a playful way, so that the dog understands quickly that, oh shit, I lost the toy, I have to keep focus forward. So here I do a couple of even if I ask the dog to out here, but what I do as soon as the dog releases the toy is that I pull the toy a little bit forward and the dog a little bit backwards, so that I get that extra effect from the start. And it can look like this. So what happened there is that I always have tension in the start, because it gives the dog that extra focus forward, but also the dog learns that he has to keep control of the toy, because otherwise he will lose it. And that's a tool that you will have use of in many other training, and especially in detection training and indication training, where focus forward is a key thing. So if we look at another video here, so I want the dog to be engaged, focused from the start. So I move a little bit. I have my hand in the pocket, which makes the dog more paying attention to me. And when I can see that the dog focus on my hand, waiting for the toy to go there, then I pull the leash. So that's when I get that focus forward that I can use as a drive building part in the chasing games. The next step in chasing games, after I have after I have done a lot of chasing, the dog is highly motivated, then I can actually start to add some social components and make me more part of the play. And the only thing that I do there is that after the dog grabs the toy, I've done the twitching, I have the leash, I let the dog go, I let the dog have the toy. But what I add here is to start building expectations of moving towards me. So I do let the dog win the toy, but as soon as I give the toy to the dog, I move backwards. And then I encourage the dog to follow me. And when you have done that a couple of times, you will see that becomes more or less a reflex. So the dog, when he gets the toy, he starts to move towards you, because he have learned that it will not mean that he will lose the toy. And that is the beginning of training a reliable out. Because if the dog is not even willing to go towards you, why would he release the toy? So it is the only social component that I add to the chasing games quite early. It's not out, it's not anything else, but just moving toward me. Twitching, let go, move backwards. And the dog will realize pretty quick that, he's not trying to steal it. I can actually go towards him. And that's something that you can start to do in the chasing games. As soon as you can feel that the dog wants to stay around you and he doesn't go in the opposite direction, then you can gradually start to practice him to move towards you. Flirt pole I have discussed, mentioned a couple of times. It's a very important part of the fitness training that we do with our dogs, because flirt pole means that we can move the toy much quicker, and the dog has to run really fast to catch the toy. And the flirt pole is normally 180 centimeter plus rope and the toy, so we can move the toy in a circle around us, and which is a really exhausting type of fitness for dogs, and that makes it one of the most important fitness aspects of our training. But it also increased even more motivation and speed for the toy itself. Again, we have to do the targeting so the dog knows where to bite, and that's why we also do full circles first before we do turns. And again, the turns should be on the outside. And flirt pole looks like this, and here you can see all the components that we have used before are the same. Leash tension in the start, moving the toy away from the dog, gradually add a little bit tension to the leash during movement. And as soon as the dog grabs the toy, we strengthen the grip with twitching. And we leave the toy in that same place after the session. So the dog builds up the expectation on the toy and chasing. And looks like this.
All the way holding without losing the toe. Oh, bravo.
So the same principles, and that's something that we do for with our dogs that we train for professionally for detection or yeah, all types of service, because and then it's not about play development anymore, it's more for fitness training. And that type of chasing they are doing for 20-30 minutes every day, full speed without any stop, and that's an extremely good way to build that type of physical condition that they need for working hard and to recover quick. But of course it also kind of maintain the value of the toy itself. Play rewards in different situations later on. How do we use the rewards? Well, for example, I do very often, as you could see, play development with the toy on a rope. But for many dogs, when I am training, let's say search, and I want to just throw the toy to the dog when he finds, then I actually normally use a toy without the rope, because then it's bumps away in different different movements. Because if you throw a toy with a rope, it very often just goes flat on the ground. So the toy on a rope is more used when I actually do the active playing with the dog. But when I just deliver a toy, it's often have more effect if I throw a toy without the rope. It depends very much on the dog's prey drive. Some of them are crazy about the toy, and then you can throw the toy with the rope and still have full effect. But for many of the Labradors, for example, and Spaniels, they really enjoy it when I do the chasing. But if I throw the same toy to them with the rope, then they prefer the one without the rope. So still be open to how to use it in an actual reward situation, training situation. The social play, just to mention a few things about that, because that's like the next step then. The first thing that I do in chasing games, I just described that I train them to move toward me. But the big difference in the more social playing tugging is, first of all, that I start using a toy that I can hold with both hands. And I need to be aware of my body posture. If I just hang over the dog like this, it can be too overwhelming. So even when I want to play social tugging, I normally begin with presenting the toy a little bit from the side. So I gradually add more and more of myself to it. And this is where I start using my voice and body more often, because now I want the dog to see me in the picture. So if I start to move with bigger movements and I also talk to the dog, then automatically the play will be more social, and also, like I said, my movements and the movements that I do with my legs. And now we play close instead of throwing the toy or chasing. And to be able to play close, everything will be so much easier if I have a dog who has this really, really strong interest for the toy that has been created through the chasing games. So that's how they connect. And play development part 2 is where we go into the tugging more, and how we train the dog to come back with the toy and to release the toy. So yeah, thank you very much. That was everything, all that I had to say tonight. I will immediately send out the recording to you, and yeah, hopefully, or good luck with your training. And if you have any questions coming to you later on, you can always send me a message or an email, and I will try to help. See if someone has any questions. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you and good evening.